Bali was really heaven and Ryan was sure of it. The warm water felt so good sliding as she quickly took a shower. She and Jungkook had spent the whole day touring. At the beginning of the tour, he was on his cell phone all the time, and it bothered her because he was missing all the beautiful sights. But then she thought about it, he probably did stuff like this all the time. It was Jungkook's idea to celebrate her birthday outside the Korea to make up for the all time they have missed before. At first, she was shocked for the fact that he knew her birthday. It's not like she has ever told him about, but still he knew. Why didn't even wanted to celebrate her birthday? But Jungkook was adamant about it. They got really close after that night when they confirmed their feelings for each other. The shy, awkward kisses turned into something more intense, but they didn't go beyond that. It just became their habits to share a few kisses and peck here and there, which Ryan don't mind at all, getting comfortable with his presence. Really seeing a whole different side of Jungkook, a gentle and calm person hidden behind his tough exterior. She didn't know that her husband could be this romantic to plan a trip for her birthday. Unbeknownst to her, it's Jungkook's plan to make her happy because last time when she saw him injured, she really got shaken up by that incident. Even though she doesn't ask much about his work, but he can see the desperation and fear in her eyes. She always messages him checking up on where he is and when he's coming back home. Jungkook always told her before leaving. Still, she asked about his whereabouts and he complied without complaining. She also checks him thoroughly whenever he returns home if he is hiding another possible injuries from her. And he had told her that he is alright many times, but she is stubborn, so he let her do for her satisfaction. She didn't know that him getting shot at the back will leave that deep imprint in her mind. He can't blame her though because she has lost so many people in her life, which made her pensive about him leaving her too. And to ease this tension between them, he couldn't find a better plan to spend the time alone just with her. Away from all the tension for a while, as Charles seems to have gone on another sleeping mode, must be triggered after Jungkook had took the positions of his explosive he exported recently to ruin whatever he was planning. Charles is going silent and that's what scared Jungkook most. He hadn't heard anything about him from 2 months straight, no movement at all. But Jungkook knew better and his all focus is still on Charles to find the smallest clue about him, because this time Jungkook promised to himself that he won't leave him. Subin still gives him updates in between though Jungkook feels like he even planned out all this trip, but he still cannot be able to focus on Ryan properly. So with the last call from Subin, he told him to not disturb them anymore. He was pretty sure that Subin and Claire could handle everything while he was gone, but it still felt strange to being away for so long. He isn't used to all this. Having a family and spending the quality time with them. And now Ryan is his everything. His family, his life partner and his soulmate. Ryan sighed as she leaned her head against the window. Their driver took them around most picturesque location on the island. They were passing the waterfall when she felt Jungkook's strong arms grip her waist and slide her back against his body. I'm sorry I needed to take that call, but it was the last one. No more calls, I promise. I'm all yours now. He whispered into her ear as if he can sense her sadness after all. He planned all this to make her happy, but if she can't be happy, it's all waste. You missed some beautiful sights there, she said, pouting. Trust me, I'm staring at the most beautiful sight on the island, he said, twirling her hairs between his fingers. He even surprised himself sometimes with the sappy stuff he said when he was around Ryan, but he meant each and every word. While on the other hand, Wine was amazed at his flirting skills. To be such a cold mafia, he could say the sweetest things to make her heart flutter in delight. Wine slowly leaned down close enough to hovering over his lips, and he closed his eyes, leaning in anticipation for a kiss. But to his surprise, she bit his nose instead, making him flinch in shock over her sudden outburst. He massaged his nose and noticed Wine was staring at him with a serious expression. Jungkook looks back at her in confusion. Is she that mad? He thought in his mind. This is the payback for ignoring me on my birthday, Mr. Jeon Jungkook, she said, looking at his confused face while holding back her laugh. She instantly slid open the gate and took off down the steps onto the beach, giggling and running. She squealed when she looking back and saw Jungkook get through the door after her, so she started running faster, but her laughter was causing her to run out of the bed quicker than normal. Jungkook was sure that they were causing the scene here at the beach, but he cared less about anything, as his only motive was to catch Wine, who had left her without letting him taste those lips he wanted so badly. He was easily catching up to her, gaining more speed, and in a minute she was just few meters away from him. Jungkook pulled her back by her waist and threw her over his shoulder. Wine was screaming and laughing for him to put her down, but the pleading didn't work on Jungkook for what he was about to do, as he tossed her into the ocean and jumped in behind her. When she broke through the surface, she playfully attacks him, and they played few more minutes in the water until Jungkook was grabbing Wine by the waist to bring her closer to claim those soft lips he grown addicted the moment he first tasted them. The inevitable about to come. The little boy, about 5 years old, ran down to the dark road, tears streaming down his face. He was terrified of the darkness surrounding him. His small voice shook as he cried out, but the road was empty and no one was there to hear him. He kept running, his sobs going louder, but the night was silent and the shadows seemed to close in on him. Suddenly, bright headlights flashed in front of him. The boy screamed, trying to stop, but it was too late. He collided with the car, and everything seemed to go black. Jungkook jolted awake, gasping for breath, his heart pounding in his chest and sweat covering his forehead. His vision was blurry, and he blinked a few times, trying to clear it. Slowly, he began to calm down, realizing it was just another nightmare. He looked at his side and saw Wine sleeping peacefully beside him. The sight of her brought him some comfort. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. Wine awoke to find Jungkook standing by the window looking out at the ocean. The light from the moon cast a perfect soft blue color across half-naked form. She watched in awe as he stood perfectly still, giving her a chance to worship the fine strong lines of his back and few red marks from the earlier session. Yes, they made love for the first time, but things escalated quickly between them when they got back to Villa. Is how he held her waist, stopping her to go to bathroom, pinning her to the wall. The kiss wasn't innocent either. It was filled with so much passion and need. Thinking about it make her blush cheeks feels warm as she closes her eyes for a while. She never knew that it's possible to fall for someone even deeper each and every day, but Jungkook proved her wrong. She opened her eyes again to look at Jungkook properly, and he was lost in his own thoughts, staring at the moon. Getting jealous from the moon having his all attention, she grabbed a duvet and covered herself, not too much comfortable with her. Yet even though the things happened between them was enough to prove what they submitted themselves to each other, but not physically but emotional level too. She slowly wrapped her arms around his naked torso, hugging him from the back as he looks over his shoulder and his tense body relaxes at the contact. Is something wrong? She asked carefully, pressing her cheeks on his back. while his arms wrapped around his torso affectionately. Nothing. He slowly shook his head. I just can't sleep. Then something must be bothering you, she asked, looking up so she could look at his face. Not really. He detached her arms around him so he could face her. You know, you can tell me anything, right? She asked hopefully, and he nodded. I'm just used to bad things following good. For a second, she saw the distress on his face, which he quickly dismissed, putting a smile. But you don't have to worry about anything. It's your birthday, and I just want you to be happy. I'm happy beside you, she whispered softly. Don't ever leave me. I don't think I can stay without you now. Jungkook saw the fear in her eyes, and for some reason he knew that she is scared to lose him, as they got really close in the past months, and Jungkook himself can't stay away from her too. I won't, never, he said, kissing her forehead. Their last day in Bali, Jungkook brought her to a restaurant to spend their remaining quality time as background music hits. He asked her hand to dance with him, which she gladly accepted, holding tightly on him as he whirled her around. She was truly happy. If this dance never ended, she would have been just fine with that. A part of her knew that they have to go back, but she wasn't ready to share him again with his work. She knew it had come to an end. She quickly wiped a tear from her face as he leaned down to kiss her. A man sat in dimly lit room, casually playing with his lighter, opening and closing it with a soft click. His eyes were cold, focused on the small flame that flickered with each moment. The room was quite filled with only the sound of the lighter. The door creaked open and another man stepped in. He stood straight, respect evident in his posture. Boss, everything is done as you instructed. A man also informed that the target has returned to the Korea. The man in the chair didn't say much. He simply nodded and waved his hand, signaling the other man to leave. The door closed behind him with a soft thud. Leaning closer to his laptop, the man's eyes scanned the screen. Multiple cameras which displayed every corner of the locations he had covered. Each movement, each person was under his watch. A low chuckle escaped his lips, growing into a maniacal laugh. I did a mistake to underestimate you, Jian. But now... He stopped laughing, expression turned serious. I would have been knew why you're so desperate to catch me. So no more hide and seek. He muttered darkly, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. You are being too fearless and taking advantage of me, but not anymore. Closing the screen in front of him with a loud thud. I'll make you remember what fears looks like. The room seemed to echo with his maniac laughter as he prepared for what comes next. Ryan and Karina sat at the small table in the corner of the cafe, sipping their coffee and enjoying the brief break from their hectic shifts. Karina leaned back in the chair, studying Ryan's face closely. You're glowing, Unni. That trip to Bali, she pointed out with a teasing smile. Bali must have been really good for you. Yeah, I mean, we strolled around the island and the place is so beautiful. Come on, Unni, don't act like you don't know. It's not the beautiful scenery, something definitely happened to that trip. Ryan's face instantly flushed, realizing what Karina was hinting at. She playfully slapped Karina's arm, her cheeks burning. Yeah, stop. Karina laughed even harder, leaning forward. I am just happy to see you guys getting closer. It's been a while since you looked so happy. Ryan bit her lip, a soft smile replacing her embarrassment. Yeah, it was nice. We have been closer, but there are still things Jungkook doesn't share with me. He's so guarded sometimes and I can't figure him out at all. Karina nodded thoughtfully. Give Oppa some time. If it's really important, he'll tell you. And as far as I noticed, he really loves you. Remember when we stayed at my place before you two got married? He always used to call me to check on me. Ryan knows about how caring Jungkook is, as he always subtly takes care of her, But at that time she thought Jungkook just wanted to fulfill his promise from her brother to keep her safe. They don't even know anything about each other much. He was basically just another stranger for her at that time. Still, she felt comfortable around him for some reason she doesn't know. They both stood up to leave. As they stepped outside, Karina suddenly stopped. Shoot, I forgot my purse inside. Wait here, Annie, I'll be right back. Vine watched as Karina hurried back inside. She shook her head at her clumsiness. Her own phone buzzing from inside her bag. She reached in, fumbling to find it, and when she did, a smile crept on her face. It was Jungkook's call. Just as she was about to answer, her phone slipped from her hand, hitting the pavement with a small clatter. She knelt down to pick it up when a deafening sound exploded behind her, shattering the cafe window. Vine screamed instinctively, covering her ears as she dropped to the cold pavement, her heart racing. The screeching of tires echoed, followed by the distant sound of people screaming. Everything was a blur, her mind unable to process whether the screams were coming from her or the terrified crowd around her. Suddenly, cold hands grabbed her, pulling her up. Van's vision focused, and she saw Karina in front of her, wide eyes and frantic. "Onni, are you okay?" she asked with concern. Van tried to speak but couldn't find the words. "I don't." Her gaze shifted past Karina to the cafe, where people were running in every direction. The owner was yelling for everyone to stay calm, shouting that the police were on their way. Van's mind raced. Someone shot at them, or at the cafe, or was it meant for her? Van sat in the corner of the cafe, her hands trembling uncontrollably as she stared blankly at the table. The once bustling cafe was now eerily silent, save for a few hushed whispers and the distant sounds of siren approaching. Karina sat beside her, equally shaken, her face pale as she clutched her arms tightly around herself. Neither of them had spoken since the glass shattered, their minds still reeling from the shock. A man approached their table, cautiously holding out a small glass of water. "Are you alright? Here, drink this." His voice was gentle, filled with concern. Vine didn't respond, her hands staying limp on her lap, her eyes unfocused. Karina glanced up to the man, her lips pressed into a thin line as she shook her head slightly. "Thank you, but she just needs a moment." The man nodded and walked away, leaving the two in their shared silence. Vine's breath was shallow, her chest tight as she tried to make sense of what just happened. She couldn't, her mind was frozen, locked in the memory of deafening sound, the shattered glass, the chaos that had followed. Suddenly her phone started ringing again. She was still holding it in a death grip. Her mind was still in a fog that she didn't even check the caller ID. "Hello." With a shaky hands, she answered. He finally answered, "So when I can come to pick you up?" Jungkook's familiar voice cut through the static in her head. Vine blinked, her brain struggling to process his words, her voice barely above a whisper. She replied, I don't know." There was silence on the other end for a moment, then Jungkook spoke again, his tone confused. "What do you mean you don't know? Didn't you say your shift was going to end early today?" Vine trembled, unable to get the words out. Her hands holding the phone shook violently, and her breath became uneven as she tried to speak but didn't form a single coherent sentence. It was as though everything was crashing down on her at once. "Jungkook, oh God," she said right before she burst into the tears. Vine, his voice grew sharper, not the friendly tone he used before. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" Vine closed her eyes for a moment, tears slipping down her cheek as she heard the siren's noise getting closer. "Vine," he calls her again. Someone shot at us." She cried even harder that she admitted it out loud. Silence. She didn't know if he was even still on the phone. She couldn't hear him breathing or anything. "Are you okay?" he finally asked after a few moments. His voice sounded flat, a tone she never heard before. "Yeah, I think so." "Don't move, I'll be there in just few minutes," he said before she heard the line go dead. "Boss, what happened?" he asked, staring at the unreadable expression on Jungkook's face. It wasn't often for Subin can't read his boss mood. "Is she okay?" Someone shot at her. he quietly said as he grabbed his keys from the desktop. Someone shouted. Subin heard him whisper again, but more to himself. Subin watched closely as Jungkook stood there for a moment, bracing his knuckles, having keys on the desk so hard that all the color was draining from them. Boss, he softly said before everything on Jungkook's desk went flying off the floor in a loud crash. He yelled as he rushed around his desk and out of the office. Subin ran after him, trying to keep up as Jungkook took the steps four at a time. David, we have to go, he shouted, and Subin hollered over his shoulder as Jungkook tore out of the front door. The driver quickly dropped his plate of the food and ran out of the kitchen, no question asked. Jungkook couldn't breathe. They shot at her. Someone actually shot at her, tried to kill her. He was trying his best to keep cool. Half of his brain was telling him to remain calm, to get to the restaurant, assess the situation and go from there. The other side of his mind was checking up anyone who had ever crossed him so he could kill them painfully. David slipped behind the driver's wheel of the car while Jungkook was in the passenger seat and Subin in the back. When they pulled out onto the road heading towards the cafe. What are they thinking, boss? He asked. Jungkook didn't answer. His mind was still racing. He had to gain control and get his mind focused. Boss, do you realize that place is going to be swarming with cops, right? He sighed when Jungkook didn't answer. Jungkook just continued to stare ahead through the windshield. David slowed down as he pulled up to the opposite side of the cafe to an onslaught of black and white police cars. Let me go instead, boss. The police already has their suspicion over you for shooting happened at the dock while chasing Charles. There's no point in risking it, he suggested as he opened his door. No, I'm going, he stated, stopping him, looking around for wine. That's least of my concern for now. Gosh, I know you're upset, he started before Jungkook interrupted. Upset, huh? He said as he continued to stare out of his window looking for her. I don't think upset covers what I'm feeling right now, Subin. When he finally spotted her, beside that she needs me now and I need her. He got out of the car and slammed the door. I told you I'm not sure. I didn't see the car. I dropped my phone and was looking for it then, and I heard the shots. She recounted for the third time to a different cop. She was exhausted, shaken, and just wanted to be with Jungkook. I understand you are tired, ma'am, but we need to get this information while it's fresh on your mind. Now can you tell me again what time you were walking out of the restaurant? The police officer asked while looking down at his notepad. I think it was. Are you okay? He asked as he spun her around and glanced over her body as if she needed medical attention. Vine immediately latched onto him, wrapping her arms around his waist and burying her head into his chest. Her whole body began to shake and started sobbing. He pulled his coat open and encased her inside with him as he kissed the top of her head several times. She knew her tears and makeup were probably running his expensive shirt, but she just couldn't let go. Mr. Jeon Jungkook, long time no see. He heard a familiar voice say. He turned around and to see his suspicion confirmed. Detective Park Ji-won was staring at him with that damn smug smile that Jungkook always wanted to knock right off his face. Park Ji-won had been promoted after Namjoon's death. He remembers seeing him standing in the distance at Namjoon's funeral. They had been following him closely throughout the whole year now and just never seemed to really go away. Park Ji-won, he stated dryly. Vine sniffled and peeked her head out under Jungkook's coat. She wanted to see who this Park Ji-won guy was. He was a muscular man who had thin black hair, but some was graying and prematurely from the look of his young face. Hello, miss. Her name is Jeon Vine, sir. She is a doctor. The police officer who had been questioning her said, Mrs. Vine, how did you end up marrying my good friend here? By the way, I hope you remember me. I was in the same department as your brother, he said, smiling down at her. Vine has hardly seen him only 2 times and didn't know much about this man, but she wasn't about to open her mouth and tell this man anything. Luckily, she didn't have to as Jungkook started guiding her toward his car. Hold up a second, Mr. Jungkook. We weren't done questioning her, he said. Yes, you were, he said over his shoulder. Don't forget who you're talking to, Jungkook. Wanna take a trip to downtown, he warned. Jungkook stopped and turned towards Jaewon as his mind was boiling from earlier, but this man just provoking him further. You want to try? He countered, staring at the man down. Man wasn't sure what to do. She sure as hell didn't want to get any cops list, but Jungkook appeared to be done with the conversation. She glanced back and forth between the two men while trying to wipe her eyes and nose. Detective Jaewon's smug smile appeared. Well, I guess there's no reason to if you haven't done anything wrong now, is there? He said. Jungkook turned back around and ushered Wayan across the street towards the car. Don't go too far, Mrs. Yeon. I'd still like to ask you a few questions regarding the incident today. She heard the detective ask in the distance. Soobin had transferred to the front seat while Jungkook opened the door and guided Wayan into the back seat. He held her close to his body with his arms wrapped protectively around her, and no one said a word. Jungkook carefully cradled Wayan in his arms as he stepped out of the car, her head resting softly against his chest. She had fallen asleep in his arms after crying, overwhelmed by the today's event to stay awake. Her body felt light, fragile even. Her face still showed the traces of fear, and his heart clenched at the thought of what she had gone through. He held her even closer as his protective instinct flaring. Soobin silently followed a few steps behind, keeping his distance as they entered the house. He watched as Jungkook carried Wayan through the hallway, but then they reached to the bedroom door. Soobin stopped, knowing it wasn't his place to go any further. Jungkook pushed a door open with his foot, entering with their dimly lit bedroom. Gently, he laid Wayan down on the bed, taking extra care to not disturb her. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. With a soft sigh, Jungkook pulled out the divot over her, tucking her in securely. His gaze softened as he looked down at her, the weight of what happened hanging heavy in his chest. Jungkook's eye lingered, his hand softly stroking her hair, his thumb brushing tenderly along her temple as he leaned down and pressed a lingering kiss on her forehead, his lips warm against her skin. He whispered, I'm here. Though he knew she couldn't hear him, he didn't leave her side, not until he was certain that she was warm and comfortable. Rest, my love, he whispered as his voice barely audible, more to himself than to her. After a long moment, Jungkook straightened, giving her one last glance before quietly slipping out of the room. As he closed the door, his face hardened, the tenderness disappearing into the cold resolve that now gripping him. Outside the room, Soobin was waiting, his expression tense as if wanted to tell him something. Jungkook nodded at him, signaling for him to proceed. They moved to the study where a large screen flickered on, showing surveillance images Soobin had compiled. As the slideshow began, Jungkook's eyes darkened. The laptop sat on the desk, displaying images that made Jungkook's blood run cold. These are Wayan's bodyguards, his stated voice grim. Each of them was found dead a few minutes before the cafe incident. Jungkook leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as Soobin clicked through the images of their lifeless body killed brutally. Each one lay sprawled in a various location around the perimeter of the cafe, their eyes wide open, marks and scratches covering different parts of their body. It wasn't just the sight of his men disturbed him, but something about the patterns on their skin. Jungkook clenched his fist as he looked closely at each one, his jaw tightening. Look here, he pointed to a close-up of one of Gar's chest where strange symbols were carved into the flesh. Each one of them has scratches or marked symbols. It looked like carved into their skin. Whoever did this left a message. Jungkook's gaze sharpened, his mind working rapidly. Shuffle through the pictures, show me the carvings again one by one. Soobin quickly rearranged the photos, placing one with the symbol side by side. As the images shifted into place, Jungkook's expression grew darker. The symbols weren't random, they were forming words. Soobin moved two images into correct order, rearranging them to sense up the carvings. As the piece fell into place, a clear message emerged. Soobin glanced at Jungkook. Do you recognize it? Jungkook stared hard at the final image on the screen. His eyes darkened as he recognized the language. It's Russian, he said, voice cold. Super's fingers moved swiftly over the keyboard, translating the letters. As the meaning appeared on the screen, both men stared at the word in silence. Jungkook's jaw clenched, the word signaling something deep and dangerous inside him. This wasn't just sending a warning, Charles was declaring a war, and he had used wine at the first move in their twisted game. Jungkook promised Charles gonna pay brutally for this.